Well, it's the end of 2011, and what a year it has been for me. For one, I started this channel, and secondly, I think I've watched more movies this year than any other year of my life, not only in the cinemas, but just at home and at other places as well. I can't say that I watched many films made this year, so that's why I'm not going to do any top 10 lists of 2011. Instead, I'm going to do something a little unique. This is the top 10 of my least favourite and top 10 of my most favourite films I watched for the first time in 2011. If I saw 30 minutes of it or more any other year, it can't be on the list. If I watched a series or two, I'm only picking one from each series as well. For this video, I'll be doing my top 10 least favourite. I might do a little warning here. Most of my top 10 least favourite are movies that everyone else really loves, and the reason is because that's what I chose to watch this year. I watched a lot of films that people really like, and it just so happens that I didn't like some of them. So yeah, this list might be a little controversial. I also made sure not to include anything that was made over 30 years old in the worst section. I just didn't think it would be fair. Anyway, get your tomatoes and your angry comments ready. This is my top 10 least favourite films I watched in 2011. Number 10. Fight Club. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could I not like one of the highest rated films on IMDb? Well, this is number 10, so I don't hate it or anything, I just think it's highly overrated. The first 30 minutes of the film I like, but after they invent the Fight Club, it kinda goes downhill from there. There's a lot of meaningless brutality in this film and some awkward profanity. I'm sure it's meant to symbolize and say things about society, but I didn't really care for it. I don't know, I'm just not that fond of seeing a guy beat up himself. The twist ending I found not only predictable but silly. I mean this because I guessed it halfway through the film, even though I didn't even know that there was a twist in the film, but I read it off because I thought it was too stupid. But no, the film tries really hard to explain the twist ending, and it just seems kinda forced. I can see the clues along the film, but there's too many things which don't explain themselves. I guess I don't really get the anti-consumerist message as well as someone who actually works and spends a lot of money would get. But that wasn't the reason I didn't like the film. The film also is self-aware in many situations, and it seems kinda smug, like it knows how deep and multi-layered it is. But it doesn't seem to realise that its own twist is ridiculous. There's definitely stuff I like about the film, such as I said the first 30 minutes, but how can I like a film that shoves a penis in my face as a subliminal message? Even if it's an ironic symbol, I don't care. And I wouldn't mind watching the film again, just to see how they tried to work in the twist ending, but not for any entertainment. Fight Club gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Number 9. Beethoven's Third. I watched the first two Beethoven movies as a kid, but I never watched any more than that. So I decided to rewatch the first one, which I think I've only seen once before in my life, and the third one. While the first one is mediocre, the third one is bad. Okay, first let me admit that I do find one thing in this movie funny: the bad guys. They are over the top, and not just cliche over the top, they are really over the top. And they are also really dumb too. Their actions don't make any sense half the time. And what can I say, I find this hilarious to watch. Where this movie fails is when it takes itself seriously, and it does that a lot. You're supposed to feel for the whiny kid and the girl with no personality in the movie at times, and it's often not even that over the top enough to be funny. For example, this kid meets up with this girl at several different locations by luck, and you're supposed to understand him and want him to get together with her. Guess what? No one who's watching gives a shit. His sister is also convinced that Beethoven has some good in him, even though he causes a lot of damage, and you are supposed to agree with her. Guess what? You don't. The father is pretty funny in the movie, and the mother is a really bad actor, so this is a hit and miss when it comes to the laughs, but I think a lot of people who watch the movie will be wondering one thing: where is the original family from the first two Beethoven movies? Well, the movie doesn't play like the Home Alone 4 where it pretends it's the same family, which is good, and it kinda makes sense. After all, this movie was made 6 years after the previous Beethoven movie. The kids of that family would be grown up now. So yeah, we have this other mutant family. Not that I myself were a huge fan of the original one. You want the bad guys to win in this movie, and I'm sure that was not the idea, but I think they would have been better off making a movie out of these guys rather than some bootleg Newton family. Whatever, there's a lot of unfunny moments when the movie's trying too hard to be funny, a lot of boring moments when the film's taking itself seriously, and the kids are just plain annoying. There obviously wasn't really much effort put into the writing, and my sense of humour is kinda weird, so that's why it's this high on the list. It gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Number 8. The Land Before Time 12. I watched every Land Before Time movie this year except for number 9, and while there are some really bad ones, this one lies at the bottom of the barrel as the worst. The film just does everything wrong. A useless comic relief character, unmemorable songs, a poor conflict, bad pacing, a bad subplot, a contrived ending and message. The only reason this film isn't lower on the list is because, for one, it's a kids movie, and they won't give a shit about anything I say about this. And two, it's not really offensive, it's pretty dumb, but there's nothing that will really annoy the viewer, and it's kind of entertaining seeing how many things this film just gets wrong. It's also a pretty good looking film and doesn't overuse CGI like some of the earlier Land Before Time sequels, but this film is boring and some people will really hate to sit through this. I guess it's not as cheesy as some of the other Land Before Time sequels, but as a film, it's the worst. Gets a 4 out of 10 from me. Number 7. A Fish Called Wanda, another hugely popular film. Oh bother. Well, what can I say? I didn't find it funny. It just didn't appeal to my sense of humour. Maybe I was in a not funny mood. Maybe I'm just retarded. This film has apparently made someone die of laughter, and I sit here wondering how. John Cleese's character is just too nice to laugh at when something happens to him. Kevin Kline's character is not subtle at all, and I find him just to be unbelievable as an actual character. He acts more like a stand-up comedian than a character. There's a lot of sexually related jokes which are outdated, same as stutter jokes. And I don't really find people eating other people's pet fish particularly funny. I guess the movie is just outdated, and I could have left it off here, but I do laugh at comedies made in the late 80s, but I just didn't find this one funny. Maybe it's just been ripped off so many times that it just seems old. I don't know. It gets a 4 out of 10 from me. Number 6. The Spiderwick Chronicles. This movie isn't boring or smug, just really bad. And it got good reviews too, and I have no idea why. The main reason I don't like this movie is just because of the main character, or is it the main characters? They're twins, played by this kid called Freddie Highmore. Not only does he not act like a kid when he's playing the part, but he also has this blank expression on his face, and he talks like he smokes a pack a day. He's really whiny too. I thought the characters were supposed to have Asperger's syndrome or something. Anyway, I hated both of these kids and I wanted them to die. The film doesn't really take itself incredibly seriously, which is good, because the plot's kinda dumb, but this kid seems to act like everything is serious, and he's not even over the top enough to be funny. There's also this unfunny comic relief character. There was only one bit which made me kinda laugh at this guy in the film, and it's at the end, and it was only because he did something incredibly heinous to the plot. There's a lot of inconsistencies. For example, there's this book that the main characters cannot damage at all, even though they want to, but later on in the film the pages rip apart. There's also some really bad acting by this old woman, and the ending is just ridiculous. There's also this ugly creature. Just squash it. Squash it! Also, where else have I seen this scene that they hold up to their eye? I don't know. This film could have been better. It just seems like it doesn't know when it wants to take itself seriously and when it doesn't, and I really didn't like the main character. There's also a lot of really dumb moments. It gets a 4 out of 10 from me. Number 5. Baghead. This is a horror, comedy, drama, independent film thing with an incredibly predictable plot twist. I went into this film thinking it was going to be a silly comedy parodying horror films. What I got was this pretty boring and generic drama with a love triangle where a relatable guy is in love with this girl who's either a bad actor, mentally retarded, or drunk all the time. Why? It's not the over-the-top horror comedy it claims to be. It looks like it might go in that direction at times, and that's when it starts to get funny, but then suddenly jumps to something else, such as a long generic love triangle drama scene. It's kind of entertaining, but overall just bland, and I'm not too keen on seeing a guy masturbate. It's slow-paced and boring, and it gets a 4 out of 10 from me. Number 4. No Country for Old Men. This is another film which received really great reviews and many awards. I like parts of the film, such as the scene where he flips the light switch. It makes great tension. But the rest of the film is filled with unrelatable characters with accents I can't understand, relentless dialogue scenes, a story which ends abruptly and off-screen, a rather bland antagonist which should belong in a cartoon, and really slow moments. The film really could have been half an hour shorter. I do like the quiet scenes where the main character is being stalked, but I think the film spends too long on other things, and even that gets old after a while. This is a forgettable film, and I was really bored by the end. Maybe me, being 17, this is no film for young men like I don't know. 3.5 out of 10 from me. Number 3. Leaving Las Vegas. Said to be Nicolas Cage's best performance, I found this film just predictable and pretentious. Nick Cage seems really bored on the set, in comparison to a film like The Wicker Man where he is left to run wild. I'd say he had rules and regulations on the set of this. I didn't care for the main characters. I knew what was going to happen to them and how they would feel for each other. Nothing interesting happens, nothing unexpected, and the movie makes you hate sex, alcohol, and Las Vegas. It just really makes you feel like shit. Some people will say that this is a good thing, as I've been emotionally affected by the film, but no, the film just negatively just reinforces everything I thought about people already. It's just obvious. Nick Cage isn't even over the top enough to be funny, and doesn't come across as being a great enough character to really feel sorry for. The film is slow, in no way pretty, and doesn't really tell me anything I didn't really know before. The film really doesn't show how Sarah, the hooker with a heart of gold, is affected in the long run by her experience with Cage's character. Personally, I don't think this is a good thing. The tale the film tells is unexciting and not very creative. I'm not a fan of these kind of films. Sorry. Gets a 3 out of 10 from me. Number 2. Good night and good luck. God, I'm going to get so much hate for this video. The reason I don't like this movie is because I just didn't find the conflict very thrilling. I found no reason to care about Edward R. Murrow and his crew, as they seem to have no real character, probably because the film has a fear of not following anything historically incorrect. I just don't care about the conflict with communists because it's in no way exciting, and the film doesn't really make out why I should care. The film is made up of long speeches, a death of a character which I don't really know much about, and some really snore-inducing jazz music. I guess the film is trying to pull us into the atmosphere of the 1950s, but it doesn't really have to do this by using the same way of entertaining the viewers that they could use only then. It just makes it feel like I'm watching a film from the 50s rather than bringing us into that era. For that reason, I found the black and white unnecessary. The film is incredibly slow, and I have no idea why this story has to be retold when there are plenty of other news stories from that past just waiting to be imagined in film. I didn't care who won the debate in this film, only that someone would so the film would be over. It gets a 3 out of 10 from me. Number 1. Sin City. I've already done a review of this film, so I don't really think I need to talk about it that much. Firstly, I don't like how it's in short stories. Secondly, I didn't find any of the characters very relatable. Thirdly, the film tries so hard to be gruesome and disturbing that when I don't feel disturbed, I just think that the movie is just trying too hard. It thinks it's really cool and really edgy, but it's just boring. The film tries to put nudity and a lot of violence to get the audience's attention, but this does not work for me. All 3 plots aren't very interesting, have unbelievable yet somehow uncreative and bland characters. This world you're brought into is one with no positivity and very little vibrance or creativity, just dullness. This world is one that nothing can really come good out of, one that isn't even odd enough to be somewhat artsy like Dark City. It just has a very dark and dry sense of humour. Some people like this, and I really don't. And I think that's just it. The film's not for me. Speaking from the point of view of someone who has no interest in comic books, this film was relentless, unimaginative snorefest. I could see that they did put genuine effort into making this, and apparently it's really faithful to the graphic novel it's based off of, but just because most people think it's the best thing ever doesn't mean I have to. So Sin City is my least favourite film of 2011, my least favourite experience, and it gets a 2.5 out of 10 from me. Well, let the patronising comments begin. But to be brutally honest, I don't think any of these films are terrible. Just because I didn't find them entertaining doesn't mean they're poorly made. Just not for me. I mean, most of these got very high ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's no coincidence that many of them are highly rated. Most films I watched this year had very high ratings, and it just so happened that these particular ones I didn't like. Maybe I'm not the right person for them, maybe I'm not wise enough to understand the intelligence behind them. Regardless, there are much more films out there, I know. I chose not to watch them this year, and some films with terrible reviews I actually liked, such as Simon Says. But yeah, I hope this list gave you a good idea of what type of films I don't like, and next time you'll be able to see what type of films I do, and the top 10 favourite films I watched this year. See you soon.